Okay, guys, why don't we start with each one of us sharing something embarrassing about ourselves?
Oh wow!
Like a little icebreaker, pun intended.
Yeah. Let's go for it.
Yeah?
Break a lot of ice today.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, since we're in Delhi, I think the app story is my high school Hindi exam.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and till date I cannot get genders right. My vocab is not too bad. It's good, but it was one of the interviews that the teacher and the student are doing in class, and it's about what's your name, what, and the questions get a little more advanced. How old are you? What do your parents do? And I kept answering in Mary, and the female gender, and. Yeah, the whole class is laughing, and I mean, I'm there in front of the class thinking, hey, maybe I'm very
Cool, I'm
entertaining.
funny, yeah.
But once it continues for a little longer than you expect it to,
realize.
you start realizing something's wrong.
Yeah.
And then the teacher asked me a very difficult question. Do you call yourself a Shri or a Shrimati? And I know I've seen these in wedding card invites, but I'm a little, in that moment of stress, I'm a little concerned. What's the right answer? Then I figured, let me start with the Shri, and took a break, and then teacher said, okay.
Okay, yes, Shri.
So,
Nice.
yeah, I think Niraj still recalls it. We were classmates right from middle school.
Yes,
And
I was in that classroom watching the whole class erupt as Narayan.
Maybe that was your embarrassing moment, my friend making a fool of himself.
Absolutely. So, and there was no way to stop him. He's going on, and yeah. So
But
that
let's be
happened.
honest, boys also don't want to stop the other ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like, okay, let's go on.
you
with it.
egg the other person on.
Especially when you guys are competitive. Have you guys been competitive growing up?
Yeah, a little bit, I guess, in some sense, through,
Academics,
yeah,
quite a lot.
Yeah.
But hold on.
yeah.
Your embarrassing moment.
Oh,
Yes,
damn.
yes.
Yeah.
I thought that, I'll get away with it. Okay, so my embarrassing thing is that I stalked the both of you all night last night. And your families as well,
Okay.
right? So I went into the depths of internet, of social media, and I got to know a lot more about you guys, and probably I shouldn't have.
Cool.
Interesting.
Bangalore's most eligible bachelor.
Oh,
Yeah?
please, hello. Okay, I'm curious where this is going, but okay.
Okay, so now that all of that is out, let's since you guys are new to our Men's XP audience, let's give them a proper introduction for the both of you. So why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience and tell us everything? Tell us who you are, where you from, what do you do, and everything that you can.
You want to go?
Yeah, cool. So I'm Niraj. I'm one of the co-founders of Ultraviolette, also the CTO at Ultraviolette. I grew up in Bangalore, always been there all my life. Ended up working in different parts of the world, US, studied in the Philippines, did my MBA there, came back to India, worked at different large companies. This is actually the third startup. Narayan and I started up a project in the early 2010, trying to build drones. Had another company in 2015, and 2016 was when Ultraviolette started, right? So, been quite geeky all throughout my life, and still being geeky today. So that's pretty much me.
Yeah, and it's working wonders for you. So geeks all the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
Cool. So, like Neeraj said, classmates in school, and I grew up in Bangalore as well. Both of us, our parents are doctors, come from a medical background, nothing to do with business or companies and stuff. But even for me, very curious, creative as a kid. I love sports. I play basketball and a lot of cricket during my days at school. And what happened was, apart from the academics, also got into a lot of building my own vehicles and robots using Lego, and outgrew Lego, started pulling apart appliances at home, and figuring out what could happen. And that led to us doing a lot of cool projects during our time at engineering. In fact, we won over 40-50 competitions of creative engineering across India, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, all the tech fests in these colleges, right? And we used to, a team of about 4 or 5 of us, and I think by year 4, I had saved up enough money to buy my first motorcycle when I got into design school. Right?
Which one was it?
So that was a R15, the launch in 2008. So I got, I think, one of Gujarat's first bikes in 2009. So I had moved to Ahmedabad for my master's then. at NID. And
NID?
yeah, yes.
Crazy culture, I've heard. Maybe
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
share some
absolutely.
stories from the NID campus.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so post that, spent some time in Europe, did another master's as well. Worked with Daihatsu in Japan for some time at Osaka. Worked in Volkswagen in Wolfsburg, Germany for some time. And I think both of us reconnected. No, I mean, we were always in touch, but reconnected with regard to projects on Kickstarter and interesting companies and what Tesla has been doing. And both of us felt the larger companies are taking time to react to new ideas and opportunities, and why don't we, make the move back to India and get started?
So when you go outside to study, right? When you go abroad to study, what is the quality of education there? Do you think it's better than India? Is that the reason why you guys moved out?
For me personally, it was the Indian automobile scene then was more of a facelift culture. Now, of course, we have more interesting tech coming in. But think about 2010, 11, 12, 13. A lot of facelift culture, and I didn't want to spend the prime of my creative time, making new wheels, mirrors, this, that. I wanted to spend more time on new tech that could influence the future of the market. Right, so I wanted to work with the companies that were, seen as those pushing the envelope in this regard. So spent time in Sweden, worked with multiple projects with companies like Volvo, etc.
Nice.
And formally worked with the ones I mentioned. And once I felt there was enough exposure of, how to build things ground up and a strong understanding of the Indian culture and the market as well, felt confident enough to, come back. So answer is not about being better than India. It's about what suits your purpose in life at that point. And mine was to get more exposure to how the global companies are operating in.
Right. So were you guys always very solid on what your calling is in life or your purpose is in life?
We still aren't. Want to be doing cool futuristic stuff, but
But you're still figuring it out. What is it?
Yeah. So I think for Narayan and me, I think we've always enjoyed working on these very crazy projects. Even the competitions that Narayan mentioned, we would never know if we're going to win, all right? We would start out and we're just having fun. Everyone else is in a hurry to, build something out. And we would be spending a lot of time doing the research and, everyone else, they'd go through, look at us and say, these guys, it's not going to work, whatever they're working on. And till 90% of the time is consumed, we wouldn't have started on anything, but we would have
we're still strategizing.
yeah, right? So we'd have been thinking about it. But then that last 10%, the amount of effort that we put, because we've thought it through completely, we end up usually, winning and winning by a big margin, right? And this started to happen in our early days. And then we realized we're good at this, right? The first few times it happened, it was more about the prize money and, partying after that. Then we realized, this is something that we can actually probably, it can turn into a career as well.
Yeah,
right?
make a living out of.
Yes, right. So we started to take on more and more ambitious projects and we pull off these crazy solutions. And that's pretty much what...
Now you guys are founders and everything, right? But you worked in companies before.
Yes.
How were you guys when you were employees? What kind of employees were you?
I think both of us talk about this, right? We meet a lot of prospective startup founders and people talking about how to get started, how to build a company. And being a dropout, being cool is a little too romanticized. And
Yeah?
I mean, you look at the folks that are well-known personalities across the globe today who are dropouts. The number is so small.
That's true.
And they had to do it because time was of essence then, right?
Yeah.
If you think of what was happening with Facebook and the other competing social media platforms coming up, or multiple of these founders that had to drop out, it was time and not that they dismissed education.
Yeah.
And for us, I mean, it was important to have this experience, both from my perspective. He's been working across US and India for a long time. And
yeah, I think so. People sort of tend to discount work experience also, saying that, straight out of college, I'm going to start a company and all of that. But if you don't even know how it's going to evolve, right? You need to have a sense of, how systems, how structures exist.
Yeah.
It does make sense to work in companies. You may feel like, it's getting monotonous after a period of time, but that experience is critical because when you are working on something by yourself, you don't want it to turn into that. So you already know the problems that you would face. Right, and the same applies for education and, Narayan mentioned dropouts. It's a very fashionable thing to be a dropout apparently today. But there's a certain level of, education that is necessary and required to sort of enter the system and to also, fortunately or unfortunately, have that credibility when you're going out to talk to people.
So let's talk a little bit more about the two of you. All right. So among the two of you, do you guys have like divided responsibilities that this person takes care of this person takes care of this?
I mean, given our backgrounds, yes, he's more from a computers tech background, and that's what his life has been all about. My life's all been about the creative side of the design process, the experiences, and what's also happened is in the last 7-8 years, we've had to do so many things together, and there is a lot of overlap and awareness of each other's areas of
Expertise.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and if it's not tech or design, then both of us do get involved, right? If it's operational, finance, all of these different things where it's completely unknown. Neither one of us may have the complete answer, but we have to work together to figure it out.
But I think it's interesting, right, to learn on the go to figure it out that, okay, this is interesting, we didn't know about this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so you know how they say in relationships, two people or two partners judge compatibility basis understanding, emotional availability, sex, right? So when two people come together to form a business together, how do you judge compatibility in that case?
I think that got judged from the last 12, 15 years that we knew each other before
Yes.
Ultraviolette. So
Yeah.
that wasn't so much of a factor. I mean,
No, there's an important piece here, which is, the ability to, only in stressful situations do you really realize what the other person's personality is,
Yeah.
right? And we had seen each other in all of those different contexts before because we were always in stressful competition scenarios. To a certain level, we had built up comfort that the other person is always acting rationally or with the best interests of the project at hand, right? So that way, I think there's a mutual respect that has grown over time. And even though we may disagree on certain topics, there is a collective way forward that we usually take. And there's no level of ego, right? Like imagine like you're working with your childhood friends,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a very different thing. People think that, sometimes it's very negative to, say I'll work in a professional manner with a friend. But if you work so closely with someone that you understand, how they behave or, how
Yeah.
they react, and to some sense, you're able to collaborate to a level which is never possible otherwise in a typical professional, relationship. I think that's pretty phenomenal. And I think for us having that complementary skill sets, it's also made it really work.
But it's very interesting because I've heard that there's always, male ego is inherent, right?
Sure.
Most men, and it can vary. And there are different triggers to male ego. And actually, I talk a lot about male ego with people on my podcast, right? I love to get to know more about it. But I wanted to understand what is male ego like between two founders who are professional as well, but who have that kind of bonding which is beyond profession as well.
I think we've had to keep ego aside from day one of starting the company.
Has it been easy?
I mean, it definitely was because like one thing that Niraj mentioned was very important, that we have full trust that no matter what the argument or the altercation may be, each of us is arguing for the benefit of Ultraviolette. And that has never ever been questioned. And for that, I mean, ego obviously has not played a part right from day one.
Right. Well, while there may be sort of certain aspects of, having an ego, but over time when, you get reality checks along the way,
Yeah.
and that is very frequent when you're trying to start something from scratch, right? So that keeps the ego in check. I think there is no point in building up, that ego like we see in certain startup founders, getting to a certain level where they think that, the world revolves around them.
Yeah.
That's not possible. You can't be in touch with reality. So for us, it's always been that reality check that is making it work.
Nice. And what is one quality that you both like about each other, or really admire about each other?
I obviously know what his strong areas are, but even if it's an area outside his comfort zone, he will research the crap out of it. And we all of us in the company have that complete trust that if there's a problem that Niraj is trying to solve, it will probably be the most logical, best researched way to go about it.
Nice.
May not be the easiest, but it would
But it'll
definitely be,
definitely-
yes.
And that probably has to do with my sense of paranoia that I don't have enough information. I should gather all evidence and all information before taking a decision that I know nothing about. right? So there's a tendency to, just go all out, understand what the problem is, right? And yeah, in terms of Narayan, I think his attention to detail, to the smallest element, to the last bit, that's something that I've, really admired. And something that, at times will feel like a difficult decision. You've seen the motorcycle,
Yeah.
right? Every aspect of that bike, I think there has been no compromise. And if there was ever a compromise somewhere along the way and Narayan caught it, that's it. Like the entire team, everyone would have to work double time to make it perfect. And it may have resulted in a lot of extra work for a lot of people, but it was necessary. It was in the best interest of the F-77 and Ultraviolette. So that's something really
So it's
admirable.
paranoia both ways.
Yeah. And somebody once told me that you need to be obsessed with what you're doing. It can be your craft, it can be your skill, it can be your product, and only then you can, make something off of it. And actually talking to both of you, I can feel the obsession, right? And which is required, like the paranoia, I'm all for it. Who's harder to impress between the two of you?
Niraj.
Him?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, I'm just being me, so just trying to, and it's not that I'm critical or anything. It's just
So
me.
with me, I'm more impulsive. If I'm happy, I'm expressive about it. If I'm pissed off, I'm as expressive about it. With him, is a little more measured. So I think I know him, but for other folks, it may take a while to figure out, am I doing things the right way?
And so are you also the more diplomatic kind?
Neither of us.
You guys
I
are not
wouldn't say
diplomatic.
that. I
I
wouldn't
think
say that.
we used to be, but progressively, optimizing for time is
Yeah,
something
sometimes
we've had
it's
to.
hard
Yeah.
to always, be nice. When
Tell me about it. I suffer with that, being nice syndrome. Maybe I can learn a few things from the both of you.
Don't give undue respect where it's not required. I think that's something we've had to learn as well. In India, you have a lot of this right from your early childhood. You're saying sir, sir, sir for a lot of things. And then when you spend some time in other places, other parts of the world, you understand that respect doesn't come by how you address a person necessarily, right? It comes by how you value their relationship with you.
Yeah.
And I think for both of us, that's been an important part of what we sort of inculcate with more people on the team as well.
And we also end up, meeting a lot of, either very influential people, industrialists, and, there is a certain level of, credibility and respect that is earned and something that, people have been put on a pedestal before, right? And we encounter that pretty frequently, right? So we take all of this with a pinch of salt. I mean, we try to figure out for ourselves what is real and what is, made up or make believe in some of these scenarios, and still try to be respectful.
No. I think that's all that it takes, right? It's enough. Being respectful is enough, and then the other is fine. It's transitory. Let's talk a little about Ultraviolette now. Okay, let's talk about your company. But first, tell me why the name Ultraviolette.
Okay, so we were clear we're building a global company right from the start. That's what got us to India, right? We've appreciated companies like Sony, Apple, Nike that have started from something that involved ground up development and now have made it to a scale where the brand has grown beyond a type of product or a segment of product, right? Any of these companies, you don't associate with a mobile phone or a shoe or anything particular. It's what the brand means to you today. That's what we've wanted to create Ultraviolette into, and that's, I think, the ideal path we would want to grow the company into, which meant right from day one, we need a word that has international recall. Violet, the French spelling of violet, violette, as you pronounce in French, refers to the color, also refers to the flower in the feminine tense. And that was interesting as something that we felt would catch on. And then as we spent more time, we figured everything we want to do is high tech, high performance, cutting edge, and ultra sort of.
And the interesting thing there was also that we were looking up different words and different pronunciations and words that would make sense across languages. So the word violet actually had similar meaning, connotation, pronunciation, across 30 plus languages, right? And all of those different languages have spawned into something very different from each other, but the word has stayed the same. And so, in fact, 6 years after we came up with the word and the name, we actually saw this happen. Last November, we were in Milan, at the Milan motorcycle show. And when people came and they saw the bikes for the first time, and they were just mind blown. and they looked up at, which company is this, and it said Ultraviolette. And they were, they were very curious, where is this company from? It wasn't that, they could associate it with one country. They just instantly got a sense that this is definitely a global company. And, but yeah, we worked on that for like 6-7 years before. But it was fun to actually see it happen.
Nice. And what were, like, I'm very curious to know what were the other names, like, in the list? What were the rejected names before you settled on to Ultraviolette?
There's actually some, I think 200 odd names. So I was like, but I can't remember too many of those.
Do you
But
remember a few of them which came very close?
No, not really, because the moment we texted each other on WhatsApp about this particular thing, it caught on and then it...
so there's a funny story here. So Narayan had already, started what was zombie motor concepts back then. And the company actually had the word zombie in its name.
So
And
this was when we were doing personal mobility, these lightweight portable vehicles that are self-balanced. So the idea was to create, augment countries that have an advanced public transportation network with a first and last mile carry-on vehicle.
Okay.
So these were like 6-7 kgs and single wheel, had its own motor, battery, everything integrated. You stand on it, self-balancing and just easy to navigate as well. And when you're on the vehicle, you're like if you take off the vehicle, you're like a zombie, right? And that's where the name zombie came in from. Was fun, but we felt it wasn't.
we got feedback from people, very traditional investors, like, what is this zombie? Why are you calling your company zombie? Like, right.
Yeah, it probably would have given the wrong message. What are you trying to do?
Right. Yeah.
And what was it like to raise capital? Like, what was the struggle? What was the process to raise your first capital?
Probably very different from what you'd hear in many other cases, because in India, we were among the first hardware startups. And India's historically been, a lot of software has been happening, a lot of SaaS companies, service-based startups as well. E-commerce had been doing well. But hardware was something the investor community was not familiar with at all. So we were clear before our first investor meeting, we spent whatever money that we could pull up together and build some of the tech to a proof of concept stage.
Okay.
So
Like a prototype of sorts
Yes.
to show them.
and we knew from an EV perspective, the whole powertrain, the battery, the motor, the smart electronics on the vehicle were newer problems and harder problems to solve than a good-looking motorcycle or a motorcycle that handles well. So we put the mechanics for phase 2 and solve the electronics in phase 1.
And, for people to actually come and witness that was actually very surprising, because most, founders end up going with presentations and, talking about what, is a hypothetical future if everything that we want comes true. And we were the other way around. We were like, you should probably come down here or, come downstairs. We've come to meet you. There's a motorcycle downstairs. You want to take it out for a spin.
That's very refreshing also to hear, because a lot of young people right now, even our audience for that matter, they get, disheartened very quickly. They get very impatient for success, right? So they try for a while, and after that, if they don't see things moving, they sort of, they give up.
Right.
So what would you like to say to them? That what does it really
it's
take?
very situational. I don't know if we can generalize it as such, but if you have so much confidence in the idea and your immediate circle of people resonate with that, because often if you trust your closest friends and your family, they should be able to criticize you or tell you, that I think something is off here. And if it passes that loop as well, that means there is a certain amount of merit there. And figure out what the feedback is from the investor community. Probably it isn't about the idea. Probably it is, are you by yourself or with 2-3 of you, are you going to be able to pull this off? Which means spend 3-4 months, get 4-5 more people motivated by what you want to build, form a team, and then go back to the same investor.
And yeah, often, people get convinced over time. It's not that in the first meeting, these are again very dramatized, kind of romanticized stories where, you meet an investor and they write a check.
Like an elevator pitch, we have not seen it happen.
Yeah.
Have you guys tried for an elevator pitch?
Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
of course. Yeah,
Like 30-40 seconds? Is that depending
we've
on the
tried to
building?
grab cab rides with investors. We've tried to get actually into an elevator from, the ground floor to the event, wherever it's happening, and
Yeah,
whatnot.
You have to catch people. I've got people while they were having lunch at a restaurant in Indiranagar in Bangalore and did a 30-second pitch while they had a fork in their hand and the food.
Did it ever work?
It's
Or
great.
got you the second meeting at least?
That
Yes,
it did.
that
Yeah?
it did. Yes. So that ends up happening, and sometimes these things take months, right? It's not a one encounter, one meeting that way, but it does work, right? And that's something that people have to realize, that there's persistence, perseverance, and don't burn all bridges if
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, because you don't know when, in our case, there are people who initially told us that, this is not my cup of tea, I wouldn't, invest in Ultraviolette, but today they're like, I missed out on that round and I would love to participate.
So when we talk about the EV space, right? Like for somebody, for example, somebody wants to crack the space right now, get into the space right now. What are a few things that they need to know to get into the EV space?
Building tech for high performance kind of requirements takes exponentially longer than building for low performance requirements. Goes back to fundamentals of physics, where your current goes up, your heat and other things go up exponentially, right? So what works to keep things safe and cool and functioning at lower performance bands won't scale up to higher performance vehicles. So inherently that itself manifests in multiple ways. So I mean, if you're clear of doing something in the low performance band, then tech is probably not the hardest challenge. It's the other aspects, maybe building a team, getting the right product market fit.
Okay, so let's now talk about the business side to this. All right. So first of all, can you explain what is UV? Like break it down to me in simple terms. What is UV?
From an internal, side, it's a collective of people that are passionate about building future experiences and tech. I mean, that's what.
That's the simplest explanation for it, because that's how we started the company. We're like, can we build some really cool, interesting, cutting edge technology and commercialize them, right? And it so happens that the first product is an electric motorcycle. So that's the simplest explanation.
Okay. And what was the vision behind it when you started building? Like, what was your vision behind it?
One of the, even till date, facts that motivates us the most is, can we build a brand out of India that resonates globally with design and technology? Historically, we've looked to the east or the west. We've seen brands in Japan, companies in Europe, US, etc. But from where we were at, from our vantage point in our early stages of our career, we knew India has the talent, but why hasn't it happened yet? And I think it was that very simple, humble vision that brought both of us back to India to, like Niraj said, try something futuristic in the space within mobility. And that's what led to the F-Series.
So there's some interesting learnings that we had, by studying other companies. Typically, when you look up, to companies which have, let's say, manufactured in India and, sold globally, any products for that matter, you won't find too many, right? You'll probably find, especially if it's aspirational products, premium products, you probably would find a few companies, making, Alcobev companies or things like that. But you won't find tech products or tech companies. And when we started to dig into why this is the case, it's often sort of bringing together very different streams of, or different elements of creativity together. Like, for example, the case of Sony, right? Sony was the first company that made in Japan really cool. Before that, Sony put Japan on the world map, right? If you look at Apple was the first company to say that we'll combine humanities, art, science, engineering, right? There are several such companies, Dyson in UK, right? Then there is Pixar. Pixar was another company that we studied, right? It's brought together creativity in a form which it worked out as a business, but it was also done for the first time. Right? So when we studied all these companies, what we learned is that it's really hard to bring together all of these different streams to, come out with one singular product or vision. But if it does happen, then it's kind of results in a magical sort of moment, right? And today that is what Ultraviolette is. It's a combination of art, design, engineering, tech, science, all coming together. And
so you know how it is said that Red Bull sells adrenaline. Nike sells motivation. So what does UV sell?
the future.
Future, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's always been about that. It's always...
And that's our most exciting challenge, because when you're trying to give the world the future, you're always on your toes, right? And at no point can we, be like, okay, we've done it, we've cracked it.
So what do you think is the future going to be like? Like, for example, if I had to ask you 10 years down the road, what will be the biking scene in India look like?
You already have one of the F-77s upstairs. I think all you have to do is just get on that motorcycle, take it out for a spin, and you'll know what the future is because it's already upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like realistically, do you see a lot of, do you see a lot of EVs on the road? Do you see ICE bikes still there on the road? Do you
Right.
see like something very futuristic looking?
Depends on the timeline. If you had said 3 to 5 years, we definitely believe there is a lot of coexistence. But if you're talking about 10 years, then I think the technology shift is already happening quite rapidly as well. Battery tech is also advancing parallelly in multiple parts of the world at exponential rates. I mean, we've heard about solid state batteries and other tech. Energy density is increasing, charging time is decreasing, and as a company, we would also be getting into harnessing or fast tracking some of these technologies as well. So, 10 years, the future is definitely going to look significantly different, but 3 to 5 years, we definitely see a lot of coexistence of technology.
Has Tesla ever been a point of inspiration for the both of you?
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you love about it?
I think the fact that they took on something that seemed outrageous at that time, because see, they weren't the first, electric car maker, right? But they were the first ones to say that we will make an electric car that is so compelling that people will switch to it. It will be so high performance, all of the features in terms of tech that it will make sense. And some of the, things that fascinate me are on the engineering side as well, right? They didn't have batteries that made sense for cars. They took what were essentially, batteries being used in laptops and put 8,000 of them together in a car, right? So it's, quite a few outrageous things were done to, make it happen. And for sure, they're like an inspiration for us.
And they made electric sexy in some way or form, right? And when we say futuristic, it is everything in the company, right? The T-shirt that Niraj is wearing today is a prototype from one of our merch launches.
Yeah,
that
both
is
of you
coming up.
actually, it looks like you guys are wearing your own merch, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is all
but
experimental
this
stuff.
This is from last year. That is from
That's
2
the new
months
one.
back. And that is in fact tech enabled. The sleeve has an NFC tag on it. And if you scan your phone on the NFC, you scan the NFC with your phone, it's going to open a portal of ultraviolet video game experiences.
Oh wow, pretty
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's what you see.
This
on
is the
sleeve,
tag
right?
that, and again, this is something that was tested out. How do you have NFC on clothing, right? And can it withstand your washing machine cycles? It's like been thought through.
And I was the first guy to walk through an airport with the NFC, and everyone was curious, is the detector going to flag you down?
Yeah.
But they didn't.
No.
Nice. Can you guys give me a breakdown of your UV superbike? Like if you had to explain it to, say, a 6-year-old.
Okay. Explain it to a six-year-old.
Explain like I'm 5. This is like.
Perhaps the age when we used to have posters on our wall. I still recall, I think the Hayabusa and the was one of the first posters on my wall. The explanation would be, it's just the most advanced piece of technology in the two-wheeler space right now, and of course the design talks for itself. That's not something we would necessarily have to articulate. That, I mean, that's going to build on itself, and
It's already a kind of a poster in many kids' walls and all of that. So we know that that's already happening, and it, like Narayan said, it's a piece of technology that's actually from the future, and it's here today, right?
And in fact, the EV space is so new, and while we've seen a lot of companies in the scooter space, the motorcycle space is kind of untouched. But on the contrary, the market breakdown is 70% motorcycles and 30% scooters, right?
Really?
Yes.
Like I were to assume that because scooters are predominant here, right? Or at least advertised
In
like
the
that.
EV space, that's what you've seen because the tech is sort of easier and faster to build out. Once you go to the higher performance bands, it requires a lot more testing, tuning. The same tech cannot scale to a motorcycle platform. The dynamics are very different. So time spent at R&D, effort spent at R&D is very, very different. Which is why while globally you have a few thousand scooter companies, you'll find a handful, maybe 5 or 6 motorcycle companies.
Right. And what would you say is the USP of a UV superbike?
USP, I mean, design performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tech is what makes it happen, but the way it looks and the way it feels once you ride it is the...
And if someone's familiar with a regular, IC motorcycle, and in terms of the handling, in terms of dynamics, we've actually made sure that it also handles like any of the other best motorcycles in the world, right? So that's not something that we necessarily had to reinvent, and we were also clear about that. Right? What we are sort of reinventing is the tech, is the battery technology, the powertrain, and the aspect of fun and the excitement in the motorcycle, but not necessarily the handling. So and decades and decades of work has been done by so many companies, right? And so what we had to do was engineer it such that if you switch over, it's an instant switch over. There's no learning curve as
Like if
such.
you're used to riding a good handling Yamaha or a Honda motorcycle, it should feel as natural. That was the intent. And this is where I think aviation aerospace engineering came into the picture. Right. So one of our first few people who I think last week now became the CPO at Ultraviolette, a person called Vinayak.
Okay.
He came from having worked at ISRO and multiple projects with companies like Boeing and Airbus designing structural systems. And what in fact happened was we were talking to, this was I think 1 year into Ultraviolette, and once the battery tech had gotten to a certain maturity, we were trying to build out the chassis and the rest of the vehicle from a more serious standpoint, and we couldn't find that talent or the knowledge base in India because there's been a lot of reliance on the Japanese companies historically, and fundamental R&D has not happened in a while, right? So that's when we met Vinayak, and with his aerospace background, and that's an industry where you're optimizing for weight, material, aerodynamics all the time, right? And we took an approach where the chassis design had nothing to do with prior history of motorcycle design, but came from an aviation aerospace world. Of course, he also understands the dynamics of what makes a good motorcycle, but the R&D process was unlike what happens in the automobile industry.
Okay, but what makes a good motorcycle?
Good motorcycle is your center of gravity from a riding standpoint,
Okay.
your weight distribution. The F77, for instance, has an ideal 50-50 weight distribution today between the front and the back, which means speeding down a freeway or navigating our traffic conditions is both just as easy. Center of gravity was a bigger challenge because you take away an engine and a fuel tank. An engine is about 20-25 kgs with a transmission and a fuel tank of another 10 kgs or so. And instead you have a battery pack that is north of 50 kgs, right? So the mass distribution is vastly different. And this system on an EV is heavier than what conventionally happens on an IC motorcycle,
Okay.
right? So, which meant the rest of the bike had to be engineered so efficiently that we reduce weight wherever possible. That also came from this aviation approach, right?
How fast can a UV go?
The production motorcycle can do 150 to 160 kilometers. That's a band in which we've capped the top speed at today. We've also got, multiple projects where different power bands are being tested out, and multiple experiments are happening. The jacket I'm wearing, in fact, is from the F99 project.
Oh,
So that is India's first superbike. And
Okay.
when I say India's first superbike, I'm talking about speeds north of 260 kilometers per hour. And to think about this in a little more context, we've had companies here that have history of 2-3 decades of, or probably longer, making motorcycles. And we are going to be the first company to make a legit superbike, and it is electric.
Yes, and there's more interesting background to that, right? So while our entire team for over 5-6 years was working on the F77, the commercial, motorcycle, we were also always, there were folks who wanted to push the boundaries of what is possible. And so once the F77 project was sort of nearing completion, everyone went back to the drawing board and said, what is the craziest thing that can be done by this group of people? And if we had to sort of, go back to our roots, in trying out very outrageous things, what would that be? And that sort of became the, objective of India's first superbike, and it's going to be electric, right? So, and from there, we've come a long way. All of the crazy ideas coming together. In fact, it's reached a point where there are ideas from the F99 project that are now making it into our regular vehicles on the roads.
nice. So, but what is the difference? What is the core difference between a bike and a superbike?
When we talk about the F99, that's a motorcycle that outputs about 120 HP of power.
Okay.
And the F77 is a vehicle that is in the 300 to 400 cc power band, which is in the range of about 40 plus HP of power. So that's the power band difference that we're talking about between a sports bike, which is the F77, and a superbike, which is the
F99.
Yes.
And that literally translates to several orders of, more power and, the acceleration that you're getting. And at higher speeds, a few other things come into picture, right? You're talking about speeds north of 200 kilometers per hour, 250 kilometers per hour. Then you're talking about aerodynamics, right? Every single surface starts to matter, right? So for example, the rider himself, if he's upright, is experiencing about 25 kilos of force at some of these speeds, right? And that's the kind of, aerodynamics that we have to sort of plan for. In typical, sports bikes, etc., these are used on tracks, but they're not made for, that extreme high speed, right? Then it's not built for that. And the F99 is one such project which is intended to, go beyond all those boundaries and cross speeds.
So 0 to 100 in
2.9 seconds is what
2.9 seconds?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think the current F77 goes from 0 to 100 in what, 7 seconds?
Yes.
7.7, 7.8.
Yes, yes,
Recon and
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is already quick, and the F99 just takes it to a whole new level. It's sometimes scary to ride it, right? It's that quick.
Also because in India, where do you ride it?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is one problem with of being in Bangalore. In Delhi, you've got a beautiful track. The BIC is close by, right? And in fact, Bangalore, we have plenty of avenues to test the other platforms, but the F99 requires us to go to other cities for active testing. So, yeah.
And yes, the F99 is a track spec motorcycle. It is meant to be, taken on a track that way. And yeah, that's the limitation. We don't have autobahns here in India.
We've got good weather, but we don't have a racetrack. And that's,
And talk about good weather only in Bangalore, please, not in Delhi. Okay, so let's talk about the battery life, right? Because I still see that a lot of people who want to experiment in this EV space still get a little, cold feet when it comes about battery and the range. Right? So can you please explain that? What is it? How far can it go?
The first question is more to do with safety of batteries. People get a little concerned about batteries. I mean, legitimate concerns perhaps because we've heard of a lot of incidents around battery malfunctions and fires, etc. From our analysis, a lot of this has happened not because of the cells themselves, but faulty manufacturing perhaps or inconsistent manufacturing on the battery manufacturing lines.
Okay.
While making one or two prototypes may be simpler to do, scaling that consistently over thousands of batteries is something that is a far more complex problem to solve. I think these may have caused some of these incidents.
Yeah, because last year I saw a lot of reports about, certain bikes and certain vehicles catching fire.
Right.
And then it scares you that how susceptible
some of
is
these
an
are
EV
also
then.
blown out of proportion. I see
Unintended.
engines catch fire all the time. But it's just not a clickbaity topic today, right? So it doesn't get spoken about enough. But if you see companies that have been manufacturing EVs for a while, credibly, with good engineering on the batteries, in fact, our battery systems also come from avionics derived approach on battery safety.
So the team members who worked on the batteries essentially come from the background where they're building very safety critical systems, right? In an aircraft, typically the avionic systems, if there's one failure, you don't let it cascade into another failure, right? You sort of cap it or you sort of limit it, or you sort of have it as a soft failure, which means that it is still able to operate in a reduced capacity. It is not a complete malfunction of the vehicle.
And you guys offer two different kinds of chargers for it, right? Portable chargers.
Yes.
So one is a normal and one is a...
one is an overnight charger. The other is, we call it the boost charger.
Boost charger.
That, takes about 2 hours to get to 80% and about 3.5 hours for the full charge.
All right. So, for example, I'm traveling from Delhi to say, first let's cover a shorter distance. I'm traveling from Delhi to say Jim Corbett. Okay. All right. It's about 245 kilometers from here. So, how many times do you think that I'll have to stop and charge and find a space? Or do you think I can just...
245 kilometers, Delhi to Jim Corbett, single charge.
Single charge?
Yes. Very much possible.
And does this vary with the terrain? Like the kind of roads? Does that have an impact?
Not too much. In fact, if there is undulating terrain, it helps because we've got so much regenerative braking power also. We've got 10 levels of regen, and while most two-wheelers recover 5 to 8% of the energy, our systems are able to recover 25 to 30% of the energy.
So what it means is essentially if you're going, up slopes, you're obviously consuming more energy. But when you're going down, downwards on a hill, you're also recovering the energy, right? All the momentum of the vehicle, 30% of that is being recovered and used to charge the battery, which means that the vehicle is actually very efficient. And the more ups and downs you throw at it, it just benefits from that, which normally wouldn't, you wouldn't get that benefit in a ICE vehicle.
Right. And where can I charge it?
So we've designed the chargers to have a 15 amp outlet. So any plug point that you find that supports 15 amp, like a regular wall socket, you should be able to charge it. And
But what if it just sometimes the load is too much,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Oh, that
So,
way, yes. Okay.
yeah.
So the chargers are designed to sort of modulate the power drawn from the building or the
Okay.
terminals according to what the load is, or even
Yeah.
flag things in case there is something wrong with the wiring as well.
Yes, so we've seen this happen, right? Like typically, some other devices are connected on the same line, like an air conditioner may be connected or heater may be connected. So at the same time, if all of these are switched on and the wiring is not capable of
Yeah.
providing that level of current, then we should ideally, tone down, the expectations of such a electrical circuit in a apartment building or wherever, right? So we've built in systems to be able to detect that, right? And this is a very India-specific thing,
Yeah.
right? And as charging stations come up, I think this requirement will go away, and we're starting to see that happen as well, right? In fact, one interesting thing that happened recently was one of our customers from Chennai. His name is Bala.
Went up
right?
to Ladakh.
Yeah, he
Yes,
went from
yes.
Chennai to Ladakh and came back, covered 7,000 kilometers in 20 days.
With
Plug-
the boost charger.
He had a boost charger. He would plug it in at every, random place that he could find. And this was not something that we did from, a company perspective or anything. Bala is a professor in a college. He wanted to go before his university holidays got over.
No, there's history to Bala also.
Right.
So I think Bala picked up the vehicles in the first slot of deliveries, and we were talking to people who had picked up the vehicles and they were going back to different localities in Bangalore or to celebrate or to a temple and whatnot, right? And Bala said, "I'm going to Chennai."
From Bangalore.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's taken the keys of the F-77 and he's like, "Hey, I'm heading to Chennai." And all of us are like, "Hey man, like, is he really doing a ride?" Then we realized he lives in Chennai and he's come to Bangalore to pick up his vehicles.
Wow.
And he's planned out his travel back. Spoke to him the next day, all good, and we're like, "Oh, cool, very interesting story." And Bala reaches out to us 1 month later, and he's like, "Hey, I have my annual summer break, right? Yeah, this was around May, June or so, and I want to go to the Himalayas. Can you guys help me in any way or form?" And we were unfortunately super tied up with company operations. Our stores, Bangalore store was just going live, the UV hangar, and we weren't able to do the ride with him. What we did was we did a 1-day training on if you have a fall or if something minor breaks, how do you
Right.
service the vehicle?
Yeah.
And that's it. The rest of it was like
All
an
him.
incredible.
Yeah, incredible. And he went from, temperatures ranging from 45 degrees in Nagpur or higher to minus 15 degrees.
Yeah.
And, at places there was no electrical grid, army camps. He was charging it in places where, people told him to get indoors because there were snow leopards. So he's got this whole
Oh, wow.
crazy experience that he had. And he did that with the F-77. So pretty crazy.
That's pretty crazy, yes.
And one more incredible thing happened. So after this ride, Bala applied for and got the India Book of Record and the Asia Book of Records for the longest ride on an electric vehicle in that zone. But we realized one more thing. Somebody told us later, right? I mean, one of the catch-ups. So Bala had crossed Simla and he was heading into sub-zero territory. And we had spoken to him the day before, and it was, I think, 10 days, 12 days into the ride, all good. And all of us at office were like celebrating, hey,
He's made it to, Himachal Pradesh and like all this is happening. And then we realized one person spoke up from behind and said that, I don't think we've enabled charging below 0 degrees. Okay.
Oh, so that
Because-
is also a factor.
Yeah, so that version of the firmware, because we were just retailing in Bangalore at that point, we had not, we designed for it, but the version on the bike did not support charging below 0 at that point in time.
Oh,
Yeah,
damn.
so the particular conditions there that, we were like, okay, anyhow, we're starting in South India, we're not encountering sub-zero
Yeah.
temperatures and, such cold climate. So we thought, we had tested it out. We'll do the firmware update later.
Yeah.
But then he was going in that direction, and we quickly had to roll out an update in places. This was close to the one of India's borders, where there's barely any connectivity, and before he has to reach a point where his bike has to be charged. So we rolled out the highest altitude OTA update in the world, on the highest motorable road, one of them. And this was something that we didn't even realize, but we had to do it. And then this is somewhere we should probably apply for a record, but we never got around to it.
Yeah, maybe you guys should do it. I think you guys talk a lot about the UV community.
Right.
So what is the UV community like?
So it's just that, right? Like-minded individuals who are, forerunners who wanted to take that, leap forward in terms of adopting something very different and new. And that started last year, and the community of these riders came together, and they called themselves a squadron, right, with the whole aviation theme and influence. And like Narayan said, it was hard to for us to also classify them and say that it's just this particular age group or demographic. What we saw was that there were individuals there who are buying bikes for the first time, early 20s, been following us for a couple of years, and are just so excited they would never buy a motorcycle if it were not the Ultraviolette. There's that type of audience. And then there are folks who have, owned 5 or 6 different motorcycles, and, at some point they have to take the permission of their spouse to, take the 6th motorcycle, and but they now need it badly, right? And so there's that group. And then there are folks who are in their early or late 50s, who are, for whom biking has now become, a very interesting phase of their life. Right, and for them, it is about the excitement of, for the first time, there's an Indian company doing something like this, and they definitely want to get their hands on this product. So, it's quite hard to, just say that it's one kind of person who buys this motorcycle. It's everyone who's excited about the tech and performance and design.
What are some other myths that you would like to bust when it comes to EV? Because there's a particular kind of an image that most people have, right?
I mean, you tell us. You're looking from the outside in. You'd probably have some interesting observations.
One is like, I'm also curious to know about this. Like when you talk about an electric vehicle, but then you see like, the rains will flood an entire Gurgaon, right?
Right.
So what impact will it have on the bike?
Positively impact the vehicle compared to an IC, which you can't ride in water above a certain depth because of your exhaust and engine catching water.
But you can ride an electric vehicle in water.
Our batteries are IP67 rated, and we've in fact tested the bikes almost fully submerged, to the point the rider, we joked that he needed a snorkel.
Yeah, so the bikes are capable of withstanding that level of, water. It's usually that the riders find it hard because, if there's that much water, then it's not practical to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
But the bikes are capable of it.
So rain, flood, not an issue.
In fact, the way that you see some of the bikes being, used in our testing videos, it looks like they're riding a jet ski. It's not a motorcycle.
And also when you're traveling longer distances, right? So how comfortable is the rider's triangle? Because sometimes when you're taking a cruiser out or you're taking a Royal Enfield out, it's still comfortable because your foot is slightly ahead, right? So you're still in a relaxed position.
Okay, two things there. The F77 is 100% a sports motorcycle, but what we've done with the riding triangle is made sure it is not too committed as a conventional sports motorcycle, nor is it too upright like a cruiser, for instance. The second point is you mentioned Royal Enfield. The first thing that comes to my mind is vibrations, and we've completely eliminated that on the F77. So rider, pillion, I think a huge fatigue factor in longer rides tends to come from vibrations over a few hours of riding. And now imagine that experience in a complete seamless situation.
In fact, one other interesting thing, right? Like a lot of people think, and this is a misnomer or, something that we found out later on, which is that a lot of people thought that, people who own Royal Enfield motorcycles will never consider the F77, right? But actually the reality is the other way around. There are lots of owners of Royal Enfield motorcycles who have also bought F77s. And while they enjoy the grunt and the performance of a Royal Enfield, they also enjoy the performance and, the smoothness of the F77.
I mean, what we can see there is the affinity towards brands that are doing things different.
Yeah.
I mean, Royal Enfield did break the clutter when it came to, creating brand that stood for the ultimate dream of riding to the Himalayas, right?
Yeah.
And we're standing for something very futuristic.
So in this
as well.
journey, who do you guys see as your competition?
In course of time, there is going to be a lot more competition with electric motorcycles per se, but today our competition is perhaps the IC engine segments.
Also because I'm asking this because, while I was researching and I came down to your Instagram pages, there were a lot of comments about the Ola Roadster Pro.
Okay.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's hard to comment on a fictional product. I mean,
Why do you call it fictional?
I think we haven't seen it. Nobody's seen it. And I mean, see, we encourage competition, right? Like we actually have said this out on multiple occasions that we would love to see more electric motorcycles out there. And we appreciate, companies that have gone the route of, putting in effort and, building things out, whether it's Zero Motorcycles, whether it's, the Live Wire, all of these companies.
And we know how much time has gone into R&D of these products as well, right? I mean, you cannot take a shortcut approach. Like you could probably do that with the lower end segments because tech is commodity. Failure cases may not have such high impacts as well. And but when it comes to serious high performance vehicles, I mean, we know the effort that has gone in.
Yeah, so we'd be happy to see a vehicle when it actually exists, and we'd welcome those onto the streets.
So would you still take Ola as a competition or not yet?
I mean, then the electric vehicle space, everybody who makes claims today would perhaps be competition in the minds of people. But I think the answer is time.
Time. Right. And Bhavesh Agarwal has a very strong stance on the current EV space in India, for that matter. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, see, what Bhavesh believes is, sort of going for this whole end ice age kind of thing. I think for us, the way that we believe it's going to be a sort of peaceful coexistence between ICE and EVs, and there's going to be a transition, right? And that transition has already started to happen. It's not that it's out there in the future. It's started to happen, and it's just going to see more momentum that it happens. But it's not an abrupt transition, as he may like to see it.
What is this love, of men for their machine? Like the love between the man and the machine. First, can you help me break down that?
I think it has nothing to do with men. I think it's a universal thing. It's just been amplified and brought out that way because men have been associated with certain, professions, whether it is, the armed forces or whether it's the Air Force, right? This whole idea of man and machine, I think, comes from that historical context, right? Where you see...
And it's been marketed really well as well.
Yeah.
Right? But I think over time, there is no necessary gender association that way. There are fighter pilots. India's got fighter pilots who are women and, they are on the front lines. So I don't see that as, a sort of restriction in any way.
No, not as a restriction, but just if you were to play into the stereotype, right? Like what is the emotion behind it?
I think the emotion is a sense of accomplishment. A lot of it comes to the DIY culture, right? Where you have a garage, you spend your weekends greasing the motorcycle, changing the oil, tweaking things around. So the association is DIY, and I think that's where also the connect comes in. And of course, when we moved over from taking care of horses to engines, the DIY still continued, right? You still, you're feeding and taking care of your animals in the farms, and then you're taking care of your machines, and the same thing is going to happen. There are several ways in which an electric machine is still going to connect to you. And those avenues are now going to be unlocked. Same way where people said, is AI going to eat away our jobs? Or is automated technology going to take away jobs? It's not. It's going to transform a certain industry into a more futuristic, progressive version of itself.
And in this regard, what do you think, which are the best roads in India to go for a bike ride?
I think India is interesting. A cross-country ride across, like what Bala did from Chennai to Ladakh, encountered everything from lack of roads to very well-paved highways to snow-clad mountainous roads. So for a motorcyclist, there is no ideal road. We love all terrain as long as it takes you someplace.
So I think for us, what we also learning today from our squadron, our community of riders, is that they want to go to unexplored places, right? So, and there's this whole thing around discovering new roads which are fun to ride on, and they're not necessarily just highways, but long curvy, winding roads, which are, in the hearts of different forests. And what we're seeing is that people love to spend time just discovering this. So for us also, it's always a new, learning that, oh, there's this new place that we should go check out, right? So I don't know if we have an answer in terms of which is the best road.
You're right, because I was talking to some of our owners a couple of nights back over ice cream, and some of them are used to, using Strava to document or unlock new routes and put them out and new travel paths, etc. And we were in fact discussing, can we do that for motorcycles? There is no one common place where, like Niraj mentioned, unexplored terrain or unexplored locations can be documented that others can now benefit from it as well. Very interesting thoughts.
And outside India, have you guys ever come across certain roads and you guys have studied and traveled abroad?
The Autobahn, for instance. We were doing 240 on the Autobahn and somebody's angrily flashing lights at us from behind to move aside. Right? That's the kind of speeds we're dealing with.
Yeah, and this is quite frequent because when we travel, we usually rent out cars, and we want to also have a little bit of fun, so we get nice powerful cars, and the Autobahn is the only place where you can drive like that.
And both of you ride?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you guys ever raced?
Not since school time.
Yeah.
Who do you think will win?
I mean, it depends.
Well, what is the race format?
Yes. Is it a straight line? I'll win.
What are the different kinds of format? Please educate me.
See,
I mean, you have drag races, you have circuit races, you have your rallies, like your Dakar rallies, and off-road trail riding. And
What are the fast and furious kind?
haven't tried that yet.
that's the
but
illegal kind.
yeah, street races.
Bangalore had a history of that back in the early 2000s, and then police clamped down on it.
Yeah, like underground racing scenes.
Yeah, and a few of the roads, the ring road in Bangalore, where our office is currently located, was the first sort of expressway in Bangalore. This was built in 2002.
Okay.
And it was quite popular for the midnight drag races.
It still happens. It still happens. Frankly, I can hear it from my place. And of course, the authorities have been quite smart about it by inserting speed breakers at certain locations where it no longer makes sense to go all
So
out.
UV, has an F-77 made it to the races?
I'm sure they
Yes,
have.
yes.
I'm sure.
And there are organized races as well in multiple tracks. MMRT in Chennai, the Budh circuit here, and we know of customers that have brought the F-77s to these circuits for either training in racing or taking part in racing both.
And while we're talking about races, so in Formula 1, I recently read about it. In Formula 1, even to increase the speed by 1/10 of a second, right? They spend tens of millions of dollars.
Right.
So what is that all about? Really, is that the kind of money that goes into it?
I mean, you're talking about a very extreme niche scenario, and I think that's the same effort that has gone into the F99 as well. May not be the same capital, but the same effort in terms of aerodynamic optimization for every inch, every gram on the motorcycle. And of course, how much juice can you draw out of the battery packs? How much can you push the motor? How much can you manage thermals on the motor to manage these high speeds for very, very long durations?
Right.
Very, very R&D intensive efforts.
And yes, it does take that much effort to, reduce 0.1 of a second. We've been through that loop so many times that it's now part of the process for us.
And while growing up, which have been your favorite bikes?
I used to watch the Street Hawk series. That was my first association with motorcycles. Like I mentioned, I had the Hayabusa on my wall for a while when I was a kid. And since then, it's been oscillating. Finally, when it came to starting our own company, then it's been the F-77s.
What about you?
For me, I think it was driven by the movies. Actually, my interests have lined up with the movies, right? So even, as a kid watching, the first Matrix, right? The motorcycles are a part of the Matrix, the Mission Impossible series with the bikes that were there. In fact, even, the historical movies, right? The Great Escape, right? So even the classics made sense for me. So it's always been a sort of, it's not one fixed idea of what a motorcycle means. I think it's the emotion of what motorcycling means. It's that sense of freedom. It's about riding on country roads. It's about that sense of, just, having a lot of fun on a powerful machine. And that's what I associate with motorcycles. So that's now translated to the F-77.
And that is the emotion behind riding a motorcycle. That is everything that you guys feel.
Absolutely, it's like an escape. It's a celebration. It's freedom. It's multiple things. If it's one word, it's an escape from reality.
And you know, when I would watch a lot of these movies, especially, for example, the Bollywood movies, right? Dhoom series and everything,
Right.
I would always wonder if it is really possible.
Right.
Have you guys have moments like these when you're watching something on screen and you're like, listen, we make bikes. This is not possible. And they've just put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but we also think, could we make it happen, like for real? So,
Yes, so the more outrageous, we actually sometimes think, could we make that possible? And I've seen this happen. So this was something that we did, actually. A project was called Beyond Asphalt. And Narayan and the team took the bikes out to some very extreme locations and with very professional riders who are either, professional stuntmen or, professional riders on rally tracks and all. The idea was to push the F-77s to their very limits. And I thought the bikes won't come back in, one piece. And they actually, dropped these vehicles hundreds of times on, very rocky terrain, on hills. And the images that I was seeing, the same effect that it had on me, that when you watch a movie, you think that, is that even possible? Like, the bike has no connection with the ground below, right? And they keep doing this on, on hills and things like that.
So we went to an international rally track. We went to the hills, rocky terrains, went to beaches as well. Yeah, the intent was to see, just curious to see what happens.
And the
Push the
bikes came back
limits.
in one piece. I mean, of course, there were a few scratches and, plastic, panels that were scratched. But the bikes performed. And, like, since then, we've been like, if someone's doing something outrageous, could they do that on the F-77 also? We're curious.
And in all of this, like you've spoken a lot about the product, right? But in
Sure.
all of this, I want to understand how important is the marketing?
Sure. Supremely important. But what we take care of with marketing is we are authentic in what we communicate, right? There are some cases where you have great products that haven't been marketed the right way or ahead of its times and it hasn't done well. There are products that you can't believe that people are buying, but it's marketed well. I'm not talking only about vehicles. I'm talking about different industries altogether, right? But here we believe there is a fit where we have a very strong, very authentic, strong tech background that has gone into the product and a very, very, very robust strategy of how we want to communicate this to the rest of the world. So there is no fancy storytelling. It is more about, hey guys, this is what we're doing. That's been the approach.
And in all of this, like which other brand or which other company do you think among competition also has done a good job in marketing?
I think there's lots of companies, right? Again, so there are different aspects of marketing when we talk about different companies. But the idea of, building towards aspirations of, people, right? Or the particular consumers. I think Apple, Sony, Nike, Dyson, hundreds of such, maybe not 100, tens of such companies that exist. And that they actually push the limits of what is possible with their product, whether it's for athletes or whether it's in terms of tech or whether it's in terms of design, right? And what we've seen is that these are the kinds of, companies that we respect for the marketing message, and it's authentic, it's honest, and, there's no hyperbole, there's no exaggeration. And I think we're very similar that way.
And since we spoke a lot about F99, when are we seeing a glimpse of it?
Well, there's been a lot in the works under wraps. You should hear something soon in a matter of a few weeks.
Because, I've realized, and this is something that I realized while doing research on you guys, that there's like a little cult that there is
Yes.
for UV, right?
Yes.
Because people, they are not just keeping up with the products, but they're also following up with their journey.
Right.
Sure.
So in all of that, I see a lot of comments, about when will F99 see the light of day?
Right,
When
right,
is it coming? And, it's almost like they're waiting for it.
Right.
So we first showcased the product in Milan last year, and we were actually watching the reactions of people who saw them for the first time. We actually saw, I didn't know what like a typical jaw drop moment meant, but we actually saw that happen. And we saw that happen over and over again because people were just strolling by and they'd see that and, we could see the
Happens
reaction.
at office also.
Yes, right. So we did unveil the first generation of the product at, I think, Auto Expo, and then the second generation at Milan. And like Narayan said, now it's if not, it's a matter of weeks and not months.
What is next?
What's next is you're going to see a lot more cities with the F-77 zooming on the roads. We're already in 5 cities now. 5 more in the pipeline happening in the next 1 month or so, which includes Mumbai and Delhi. So stay tuned for more updates on that. And we are also at a very pivotal point in Ultraviolette's journey, and I would say in India's journey itself, as being one of the first brands to take a product of this caliber to global markets. So we're going to be retailing in Europe and Turkey rather soon, and very, very exciting. We spoke about the Autobahn and our association with countries like Germany, etc., right, which have made fantastic automobiles, and to be present in those markets as proud manufacturers is an epic moment for us.
I think it's phenomenal, and even as an Indian, I think it's a proud moment for you guys.
Absolutely. I'm sure. I mean, it comes back a whole circle, right? I mean, one of the motivations for us to come back to India from Europe and US respectively was to get to this point, and it's taken us about 8 years?
8 years to get to this point, and this has started to happen. We generally appreciate German engineering and Japanese engineering. When people are seeing ultraviolet now for the first time, they're actually starting to appreciate what Indian engineering.
Since you mentioned Germany, we started getting applications of engineers from countries like Germany as
really?
well. Yes.
Yes. So this has actually happened in the last 12 months. So we always knew that we're able to attract the best talent in India. But what has now started to happen is that expats from different parts of the world who have worked in the Teslas of the world, the General Motors, all of these folks are interested in either coming back to India or coming to India for the first time to join Ultraviolet. So this is something pretty crazy that's happening.
Yeah, it is. And what's your hiring process like then?
We've got a lot of super talented folks on the team. So hiring is based on the team's requirements, and of course there are certain roles where we both do still get involved as well.
And in fact, it's a learning process for us. We didn't know what an Indian work visa means, right? And we had to encounter that for the first time because there was a foreign national who was looking to join Ultraviolet and they needed an Indian work visa. So, we figured it out, right? So.
And within India also, what are the kind of people or qualities that you look for when you hire?
Passion would be key. Passion with, of course, a lot of subject matter knowledge, but with enough open-mindedness to be self-aware that the collaborative approach is what we prioritize over an individualistic approach, I think.
And also the ability to, stick through certain things, right? It takes a lot of effort, as we've seen, whether that's tens of attempts or hundreds of attempts. It really requires not giving up so easily, right? And that ability to stay resilient, I think, is something that we really look for in people. It's not an easy quality to come by, right? Because people are used to, the first sign.
Cycles of success and
Yeah, especially the younger people, I think they get bored very easily also, right? They want to move on from one thing to the next very quickly. So that.
No, but there's so much happening. We've seen, we're an open work culture that way. If people are interested in multiple things, we are more than happy to encourage folks to contribute to multiple teams as well. And for example, the merchandise that we're talking about, it was design team, it was the fashion design team, industrial design team, it was marketing to come together. Of course, then on the ground operationally, finding the right partners, vendors, sourcing had to come into place as well. Engineering had to come into place to figure out the whole electronics integration. Software, back-end, website teams had to get involved because the NFC portal now leads you to a digital universe where multiple things are unlocked. So something as seemingly simple as let's make a cool apparel line required about 8 months of about 8 different teams coming together to make it happen.
Nice.
And this happened because each of these team members are equally enthusiastic about learning something from the other person and collaborating on.
And they wedded to the vision,
Yes.
all of them. Nice. And who are your investors right now?
So we have a very interesting set of investors. From the early days, I think we mentioned Vishesh Rajaram from Specially Invest, who was the first investor in Ultraviolet. We have Dulquer Salman and Ranvijay, who joined us along the way. Right. We have TVS Motors, one of India's largest automotive companies. We have Sridhar and Kumar Vembu from the Zoho Group, again, leaders in technology, especially coming out of India.
Right.
And most recently, we had Qualcomm Ventures and XOR Capital. XOR is one of the holding companies in companies such as Ferrari, The Economist. So we have a very respected group of individuals who are part of Ultraviolette because of the long-term vision that we're trying to create something for the world, very high quality, very high on engineering, that stands for being futuristic. So we found the right set of partners for that.
And how has it been working with, say, a Ranvijay or a Dulquer Salman?
I mean, it's been fantastic. Both of them. Dulquer has been associated with us right from day one. In fact, along with Vishesh, he was the among the first investor in the company. So the limited edition 001 is Dulquer's motorcycle, and he's been with us for multiple ideating strategies. Been with us for important launch events. Joined us in Milan for our international launch as well. And Dulquer, his dad, his family, very strongly passionate about automobiles, right? They've got a fantastic collection of automobiles, and every time we catch up, we're only talking cars and bikes, right? And similarly with Ranvijay as well, very interesting story. So this was days where the marketing team was just us. So social media manager was me, and I came across a message on one of the folders in Instagram, which was 8 months old, from Ranvijay, saying, "Hey guys, your bike looks cool. Why don't we sync up?" And I was like, it didn't hit me that it was the Ranvijay, right? And 2 days later, I opened the inbox again. I'm like, oh man, it is Ranvijay. And sort of got back in touch with him, and he still makes fun of us, like, guys, you took 8 months to respond to DM, and
You almost ghosted him.
but he's fantastic. Every time we catch up with him, he's brimming with ideas on what to do with the brand. So he's got the F77 limited edition with him as well in Mumbai, and I mean, super fun to ideate, catch up whenever we meet, Bangalore, Bombay, Dubai, wherever we happen to catch up. And yeah, it's been super fun working with both of them on various campaigns and ideas, and more than anything, having conversations without necessarily an outcome on just how to build the brand.
Without an agenda.
Yes.
I think now the audience will know what to look forward to, because they have more and more good news and good products.
Very, very exciting news.
Yes, absolutely.